The chandelier in the rooftop terrace of the Langham threw tiny rainbows across the white tablecloths. I remember that detail because I was staring at one of those rainbows when everything fell apart. My husband's hand was warm on my lower back, guiding me through the crowd like I was something precious, something breakable. It was his father's 70th birthday, and the whole Prescott dynasty had assembled on this terrace 40 floors above Chicago, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than my mother made in a day. I should have known. The signs had been there for months, little paper cuts I kept pressing band-aids over and pretending didn't sting. But that night, in my borrowed dress and my mother's pearl earrings, I still believed I belonged. I still believed love was enough to bridge the distance between where I came from and where I'd landed. I met Garrett Prescott at a hospital cafeteria, of all places. I was a second-year resident in emergency medicine at Northwestern Memorial, running on 4 hours of sleep and a stale granola bar. He was visiting his college roommate, who'd broken his leg skiing in Aspen. I was in scrubs with a coffee stain on my sleeve. He was in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. He asked me if the cafeteria soup was edible. I told him only if he had no functioning taste buds. He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made you want to keep being funny. We dated for a year before he proposed. A year of him showing up at the hospital with takeout containers at midnight, of me falling asleep on his shoulder during movies, of slow Sunday mornings in his Lincoln Park apartment where the light came through floor-to-ceiling windows and everything felt possible. He told me he loved that I was real. That I didn't care about his last name or his family's real estate empire or the fact that his mother had been on the board of the Art Institute for 15 years. I believed him because I wanted to, and because when he said it, his eyes were so steady and so sure. My parents drove up from Rockford for the engagement dinner. My father, Ray, had been a mail carrier for 31 years. My mother, Diane, worked the front desk at a dentist's office. They arrived in my dad's Ford pickup, freshly washed, my mother in a navy dress she'd found at JCPenney that she'd called elegant on the phone 3 times. They were nervous and proud, and trying so hard not to be either. I loved them so fiercely in that moment that my chest physically hurt. Garrett's mother, Vivian, greeted them in the foyer of the family's Gold Coast townhouse with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She took my mother's hand and said, "Diane, what a charming dress. You must tell me where you found it." The way she said charming. Like she was describing a child's finger painting. My mother beamed, missing the knife entirely. My father caught it. I saw his jaw tighten, just a fraction, before he extended his hand and said, "Beautiful home, Vivian. You've got good taste." He said it like a compliment. It was a shield. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I had learned the unwritten rules of being a Prescott. Rule 1. Vivian's opinions. It was not an opinion, it was law. Rule 2. Garrett's sister, Margot, was the enforcer. Rule 3. My job, my background, my family, these were tolerated, not celebrated. I was the interesting story Garrett told at cocktail parties. My fiancé saves lives in the ER. Isn't that something? They'd nod, impressed in the way people are impressed by a circus act, entertained but glad they weren't the ones on the trapeze. The 70th birthday party had been Vivian's production from start to finish. 200 guests, a jazz quartet, a 5-course dinner catered by a chef who'd flown in from New York. Seating had been arranged with the precision of a military campaign. I knew because Vivian had sent me the chart 3 weeks earlier, not for input, but for awareness. My parents were at table 2, directly adjacent to the family table. I had checked. I had confirmed with Garrett. I had even called the event coordinator, a woman named Allison, to triple-check. Table 2, right next to us. Close enough that I could see my mom's face when the toasts began. We arrived early. Garrett in his tailored navy suit, me in a deep green silk dress that Margot had lent me with a comment about how it would look so much better with the right shoes. I'd worn my own shoes. Black heels I'd bought with my own money from a store Margot had probably never heard of. My parents were meeting us there. They'd gotten a hotel room downtown, a splurge that my father had insisted on. We're not driving back to Rockford at midnight, Di. This is a celebration. The terrace was already filling when I noticed something wrong. I was standing near the bar, waiting for Garrett to finish greeting his uncle, when I saw Allison, the coordinator, moving place cards at table 2. She was swapping names, her movements quick and furtive, like someone shoplifting. I walked over. My heels clicked on the marble floor with a sound that felt louder than it was. Allison froze when she saw me. "What are you doing?" I asked. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mrs. Prescott requested a last-minute adjustment. Some of the international guests need to be closer to the family table for translation purposes. I looked at the cards. My parents' names were gone. In their place, a Swedish real estate developer and his wife. I scanned the rest of the seating chart. My stomach dropped. Where are Ray and Diane Mitchell? Allison's smile was the kind that people wear when they're about to deliver bad news and want you to know it's not their fault. Table 14. Table 14. I knew the layout. Table 14 was at the far corner of the terrace, partially obscured by a potted palm next to the service entrance where waitstaff came and went with trays. The farthest possible point from the family table. The table where you put people you didn't want seen. Who approved this? I asked, though I already knew. Mrs. Prescott handled it personally. I found Garrett near the jazz quartet, laughing with his cousin. I pulled him aside, keeping my voice low and even. Your mother moved my parents to table 14. He blinked. What? No. They're at 2. We confirmed. Go look. He did. He came back with a furrow between his brows that I recognized as the beginning of an excuse. There must have been a logistical reason. Mom probably needed to accommodate the Lindquists, they're important investors. More important than my parents? That's not what I said. That's exactly what the seating chart says, Garrett. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing and now recognized as avoidance. I'll talk to her. After the party. I don't want to make a scene at Dad's birthday. Your mother made the scene. She moved my parents to the back corner like they're the help. They're not the help, they're at a perfectly fine table. By the kitchen entrance. It's not by the kitchen, it's near the service area, and honestly, your dad won't even notice. He'll be too busy charming everyone at whatever table he's at. You know how he is. He said it like it was a compliment. Like my father's ability to find joy in any situation excused the cruelty of putting him there. Like dignity was something only people who noticed its absence could lack. I need you to fix this, I said. Right now. Before they get here. I can't rearrange the entire seating chart 10 minutes before dinner. You don't have to rearrange the entire chart. You just have to put my parents back where they belong. Blair will handle it, I'll talk to Mom after. No. My voice was quiet, but something in it made him stop. You will handle it now, or I will. He looked at me then, really looked, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't determination or even guilt. It was calculation. He was measuring the cost. Confronting his mother versus managing me. I watched him do the math in real time, and I watched me lose. Just let it go for tonight, he said softly, reaching for my hand, please. For Dad. I pulled my hand away. Don't. My parents arrived 10 minutes later. My mother in her navy JCPenney dress, her hair done at the salon she'd been going to for 20 years. My father in a suit he'd bought at Men's Warehouse, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. They looked beautiful. They looked like exactly who they were. Good, decent people who had driven 2 hours to celebrate a man they barely knew because their daughter loved his son. I intercepted them before anyone else could. Mom, Dad. There's been a change with the tables. My mother's face flickered with something, a micro-expression of bracing. She'd learned to brace in this family. Oh? Vivian moved some things around. You're at table 14 now. It's fine, sweetheart, my dad said, and there it was, that steadiness, that unbreakable grace that made my eyes burn. We didn't come for the table assignment, we came for you. He squeezed my shoulder. My mother tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and behind them, reflected in the glass doors of the terrace, I could see Vivian watching us from across the room. She was standing with Margot, both of them holding champagne flutes, and Vivian's expression was one of satisfied arrangement. Everything in its place. The Lindquists at table 2. The mail carrier and the receptionist tucked safely out of sight. Something in me went very still. Not angry, past angry, clear. I excused myself from my parents. I walked across that terrace with a calm that surprised me. The jazz quartet was playing something soft. Guests mingled in clusters of expensive perfume and practiced laughter. I found Vivian exactly where I expected her, holding court near the family table with Margot and 2 women I recognized from her book club. "Vivian," I said. "Can I speak with you?" She smiled her hostess smile. "Of course, darling. Isn't this lovely?" The weather cooperated beautifully. "Why did you move my parents?" The smile held, but something behind her eyes went flat. "I'm sure Allison explained. The Lindquists needed proximity to the family for... Don't." I said the word simply, without heat. "Don't lie to me, and don't treat me like I'm too stupid to see it. You moved my parents because you don't want a mail carrier and a dental receptionist sitting next to your friends. You moved them because you're embarrassed by them." Margot made a small scoffing sound. "That's a bit dramatic. Is it?" Table 14, Margot. "By the service door. Behind a plant. You'd see a handbag there, not a human being." Vivian's composure was extraordinary. "I'll give her that." She lowered her voice to that particular register that wealthy women use when they want to sound reasonable while being vicious. I seated them where they'd be most comfortable. "Your parents are lovely, simple people. They don't need the pressure of sitting next to Anders Lindquist discussing global markets." I was doing them a kindness. Simple people. The words landed like a slap, precise and deliberate. Simple, meaning lesser. Simple, meaning not enough. Simple, meaning the same thing she'd meant every time she'd smiled too brightly at my mother's cooking or changed the subject when my father mentioned his route. "My father," I said, and my voice did not waver, "has walked 12 miles a day for 31 years in rain, snow, and 100-degree heat so that people like you could get their Neiman Marcus catalogs on time. My mother has held the hands of frightened children in a dentist chair for 2 decades. They are not simple, they are extraordinary. And they are worth more than every person at your precious table 2 combined." Vivian's face hardened. "You're making a spectacle." "No. You made the spectacle when you decided my parents weren't good enough to sit near you." "I'm just pointing at it." Garrett materialized beside me. He'd seen the confrontation from across the terrace and crossed the room with the panicked stride of a man watching a bomb countdown. "What's going on? Mom? Nora? Your fiancé is being unreasonable about the seating," Vivian said smoothly. I looked at Garrett. This was the moment. The fulcrum of everything. "Your mother moved my parents to the worst table in the room because she's ashamed of them. I asked you to fix it. You told me to let it go. So I need you to tell me, right now, whose side you're on." The silence between us was 3 seconds long. It felt like 3 years. He looked at his mother, he looked at me, and then he said the words that ended us. "It's one dinner, Nora. Can we please just get through it? One dinner." Like this was an isolated incident. Like his mother hadn't spent 6 months filing down my family's dignity with a jeweler's precision. Like asking me to swallow my parents' humiliation was a reasonable compromise. "No," I said. "We can't." I walked to the small stage where the jazz quartet sat, their music trailing off as I stepped up and gently took the microphone from its stand. The feedback whined for a second, then the terrace went quiet. 200 faces turned toward me. "Good evening," I said, my voice carrying clear and steady across the rooftop. "I want to wish Harold a very happy 70th birthday. This is a beautiful celebration, and I'm grateful to be here." I paused. I could see my parents near the back, my mother's hand pressed to her chest, my father's eyes locked on mine. I could see Garrett frozen mid-step, his face white. Vivian stood motionless, her champagne glass suspended in mid-air. "Before dinner begins, I need to share something. Many of you know that Garrett and I are engaged. What you may not know is that tonight, his mother rearranged the seating to move my parents, the two people who taught me everything I know about love and sacrifice and showing up, from their assigned seats next to the family to a table in the back corner. By the service entrance. Behind a plant. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I kept going. When I asked why, I was told my parents are simple people who wouldn't be comfortable near the important guests. My father, who has never missed a day of work in 3 decades. My mother, who sent me to college on a receptionist's salary. Simple. I looked directly at Vivian. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. I love your son. I have tried for 6 months to earn a place in this family. But I will not earn it by letting the people who made me be hidden away like something to be ashamed of. If my parents aren't welcome at your table, then neither am I. I set the microphone back on the stand. The click echoed across the silent terrace. I pulled the engagement ring from my finger, a 3-carat diamond that had never felt like mine, and placed it gently on the edge of the piano. It sat there, catching the light from Vivian's chandelier, small and brilliant and meaningless. Enjoy your evening, I said. The salmon looked wonderful. I stepped off the stage. The crowd parted. I walked to my parents. My mother was crying. My father's face was set like stone, but his eyes were bright. He put his arm around me and said, "Let's go, kiddo. I know a diner on Michigan Avenue that's open late." We walked out. Through the silent terrace, through the lobby, into the cool Chicago night. My father hailed a cab because his truck was at the hotel, and the 3 of us sat in the back seat, my mother holding my hand, no one speaking. The city lights streamed past the windows, indifferent and beautiful. At the diner, a 24-hour place with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting, my father ordered 3 coffees and a slice of pie. My mother kept touching my hair, my face, as if checking that I was real. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." "She's right, Di," my father said, stirring his coffee slowly. "She had to. And I'm proud of her." My phone was vibrating nonstop in my clutch. I turned it off. I went back to my apartment that night, a small 1-bedroom in Lakeview that I'd refused to give up even after the engagement. Garrett had wanted me to move into his place. I'd kept my lease. Some part of me had always known. My best friend Tessa arrived at midnight with a bottle of wine and a bag of Doritos. She was still in her work clothes from the law office. She took one look at me, sitting on the kitchen floor in my borrowed green dress, and said, "Tell me everything, and then we're going to war." Tessa had been my roommate at the University of Illinois. She was a litigation attorney now, small firm, sharp as a scalpel, and she had never trusted the Prescotts. She'd once described Vivian as a woman who weaponizes centerpieces. She wasn't wrong. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, eating a Dorito with dangerous calm. Then she said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to block his number tonight. Tomorrow, I'm connecting you with a family lawyer. Not because you need one yet, but because they're going to come at you. Vivian Prescott doesn't lose gracefully. She's going to try to rewrite tonight. You were hysterical, you were drunk, you were stressed from work. She'll have a version ready by morning." She was right. By the next afternoon, Garrett had sent 14 texts and left 5 voicemails, each one a slightly different shade of the same argument. "You overreacted. Mom didn't mean it that way. You embarrassed my father on his birthday. Come home. Let's talk." Not once did he say he was sorry, not once did he say his mother was wrong. Every message was a negotiation, an attempt to reclassify what had happened from cruelty to misunderstanding. Vivian's approach was different. She sent an email. Formal, precise, with the chilling politeness of a cease and desist letter dressed in social niceties. She expressed her disappointment at my outburst and suggested that cooler heads might prevail if I were willing to discuss a path forward privately. She mentioned, almost casually, that several guests had found my speech distressing and that the family was considering how best to address the situation publicly. Tessa read it and laughed. "She's threatening you with reputation management. That's adorable. She has no idea what she's up against." 2 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. The timing was cruel. Or maybe it was the universe's way of forcing clarity. I sat on the edge of my bathtub, staring at the test, and felt two things simultaneously. A terror so deep it was almost peaceful, and a love so immediate and fierce it took my breath away. I told Tessa first. Her response, "Okay. This changes the legal landscape, but not the moral one. You're going to be an incredible mother. Now let's make sure they can't touch you." I told my parents the following weekend. My mother cried. My father was quiet for a long time, then said, "Well, I always wanted to be a grandpa. And this baby is going to know exactly how much it's worth. Not in dollars." I did not tell Garrett. Not yet. I needed time. I needed space. I needed to build my fortress before I opened the gates. The next 3 months were the hardest and most clarifying of my life. I threw myself into work. The ER was brutal and beautiful and exactly what I needed, a place where worth was measured in competence, not last names. I applied for a attending position. I got it. My income stabilized, my lease was secure. I started seeing a therapist who helped me untangle the knots of self-doubt that 6 months in the Prescott orbit had tied. Tessa connected me with a family attorney named David Park, a former prosecutor who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. He was calm, methodical, and completely unintimidated by wealth. "Money is leverage," he told me during our first meeting, "but so is character, and courts care about character more than people like the Prescotts want to believe." I told Garrett at 4 months. I chose a public cafe, David on speed dial, Tessa waiting in a car outside. He arrived looking thinner, older, the confidence stripped away. When I said the words, his face went through a transformation I recognized from the night of the party: shock, then calculation, then something he tried to pass off as joy. "This is amazing," he said, reaching across the table. "Nora, this changes everything. We can fix this. We can be a family. Mom will be thrilled, a grandchild. This is exactly what—" "Stop," I said. My hand flat on the table between us. "What? You just said your mother will be thrilled. That was your third sentence. Not how are you feeling. Not what do you need. Your mother." He stared at me. "I didn't mean." "You always mean it, Garrett. You just don't hear yourself. This baby is not a peace offering for your family. This baby is not a negotiation tool. This baby is mine, and I will decide how and when and whether you are part of its life. You can't keep my child from me. I can ensure that my child is never seated at the back of anyone's life, including yours." I laid out my terms. Primary custody. He could have supervised visitation, building to unsupervised over time, if he demonstrated that he could show up as a father, not as Vivian Prescott's son. All medical and educational decisions were mine. No unilateral contact from his mother without my written consent. He agreed to everything. Not because he wanted to, but because David had gently made clear that the alternative, a custody battle where Vivian's pattern of behavior would become public record, was not in anyone's interest. My son was born on a Tuesday in March. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with his father's dark hair and my mother's stubborn chin. I named him Leo. Leo Raymond Mitchell. My last name. My father's middle name. When the nurse placed him on my chest, I understood something I'd been circling for months. Every door I'd walked through, every ring I'd placed on a piano, every humiliation I'd refused to swallow, it had all been leading here. To this tiny, furious, perfect person who would never, ever have to wonder if he was enough. Garrett met Leo when he was 5 days old. He came to my apartment with a small stuffed bear, not from Tiffany, from a toy store in his neighborhood. He held Leo like he was made of glass. His hands shaking, his eyes wet. He didn't mention his mother. He didn't mention getting back together. He just sat in my rocking chair, his son asleep against his chest, and whispered, "Thank you for letting me be here." It was a start. A fragile, imperfect start. Vivian sent a christening gown. Handmade, French, exquisite. I sent it back. She sent a silver spoon engraved with the Prescott crest. I sent it back. She called, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was shorter than I expected, stripped of its usual polish. "I would like to meet my grandson. Please." I didn't call back. Not yet. There would be a time, maybe, when Vivian Prescott could sit at a table with my son and see him, not as a Prescott heir, not as a correction to the narrative, but as Leo. A boy whose grandfather carried mail, and whose grandmother answered phones, and whose mother once stood on a stage and chose them over everything the Prescotts had to offer. But that time was not today. 6 months later, I was offered a position as the medical director of a new community health clinic on the South Side. It was less money than the hospital. It was the most meaningful work I'd ever done. I took it and named the clinic Mitchell Family Health, after the two simple people who had raised me to believe that showing up is the highest form of love. At the clinic's opening, my father cut the ribbon. My mother held Leo on her hip, pointing at the sign with his grandfather's name on it. Tessa took photos. Garrett was there, standing in the back, quiet and respectful. He'd been sober for 3 months, not from alcohol, from his mother. He'd moved to a smaller apartment. He'd stopped answering Vivian's calls about legacy and started answering Leo's cries at 2 in the morning during his overnight visits. He was learning. Slowly, painfully, he was learning to be a person instead of a performance. I gave a short speech at the opening. Nothing grand. I stood in front of the modest brick building with its hand-painted sign, and I said, "This clinic exists because I believe that every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity. Not because of their name, their address, or the table they sit at, but because they showed up, and showing up is enough." After the crowd dispersed, my father found me in the hallway. He was holding Leo, who had fallen asleep with his fist wrapped around my dad's finger. "Pretty nice place you've got here, Doc," he said, looking around at the fresh paint, the donated furniture, the framed photos of the neighborhood on the walls. "It's not the Langham," I said. He smiled. That steady, unbreakable smile that had carried me through every storm. "No," he said. "It's better." I leaned my head against his shoulder, breathing in the smell of coffee and Old Spice and home. Leo stirred, made a small sound, and settled back into sleep. Outside, the Chicago sky was white and gray and full of possibility. I was no longer the woman in the borrowed dress, trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. I was the woman who built her own. And every chair at it was taken by someone who deserved to be there.